All right, welcome back, everybody. So I'm glad to have, I call him my brother from another mother, Mr. Dennis Rodriguez. He is a true master finisher. I mean, he would say he's not because he's still got stuff to learn, but
More.
he is definitely this guy knows more than just about anybody I've ever met. He knows more than I do, and I'm glad to have him on. Welcome aboard, brother.
Hey, Eric, man, good to hear from you, man. Good to see you again, too.
Absolutely. So what I want to talk about today is you are a very unique individual as far as finishing is concerned because you are like me. You want to know it all. You want to be good at everything. You're not afraid to step outside the box. And one of the things that I really thought was interesting is like you've kind of made a shift from solvent to water, and you've done it in a really short amount of time, and you're having amazing success. And so I want guys that are making that transition to hear from someone that's made that transition, sort of the things that you've stumbled over and the systems that you use, so that it can help them out for shops that are making a move from solvent to water. So give us just a little bit of background, how long you've been finishing, and then kind of what you were running before and what you're running now. And then we'll just kind of talk through those types of systems.
Okay, well, I started in antique restoration with my dad. We had an antique restoration shop. It was actually called Midway Upholstery Shop. And that business was started somewhere just in 1947. It was a family friend business who originally started it. My grandfather worked in the shop and pretty much ran the shop. And then later on, when the people were ready to retire, they asked my dad if he wanted to take over the shop and pretty much just gave him the shop. That was somewhere in the 70s. And, from there, I grew up in the shop. My first trade, actually, I've told you, was actually, custom upholstery and antique restoration. That's what we did. We took, you know, dressers, armoires, you name it, and broken legs repaired, and then also the upholstery side of it. I didn't really get into the finishing trade until I was probably, I'm going to say mid-teenager is when I got, not by choice, I got thrown into the finishing trade. It was one of those things where we had somebody who did a lot of finishing for the shop, the big finishing. We did a lot of touch up and repairs. And at one point, the relationship just went away. And my dad basically looked over at me and said, you got to figure this out. So
Nice.
that's pretty much how it started. I was probably 15 or 16 at that time. Then, as you know, there was no internet, there was no YouTube, there was no information. The only information I was able to get was from the library and from reading books. So the first finishing that I ever did was actually French polish. And I'll never say that I'm a great French polish person, but I know how to apply French polish, and I've done a lot of repairs on French polish, and that's pretty much where it started from. Doing repairs and stuff like that. But I had my struggles, just like all of us. Lots and lots of struggles, lots of mistakes. Nobody's in them days, and you came from pretty much the same generation. I know we're real close in age. Nobody told you anything. It was a secret. Everything was a secret. I had guys that came to help that had finishing experience. They pulled labels off of cans. I mean, you name it, because they didn't want you to know. So it was a lot of trial and error, a lot. But from there, I started getting better at finishing. I started doing more finishing, and started doing full furniture pieces. I've probably done 2 or 3 pianos in my life, and I'll never do another one again. I did one piano. I spent a month on it because I couldn't get myself happy enough with the high gloss, and it's just
Yeah.
one of those things. It was just like, not, that fine paints of Europe, those guys, that's something different. This was all in original old school lacquer. This was like 680 lacquer, and getting the gloss just right and not having no problems, and that stuff, it was not really easy to buff out or polish out like the polyesters and stuff that they have today. So everything had to be pretty much off the gun. and it had to be perfect, you know.
And if
So
you and if you were gonna rub it out, you'd have to wait, a month to do
you
it.
have to wait a couple 2 to 3 weeks for it to
Yeah,
cure away so that you could do any buffing or polishing on it, you know.
yeah,
So, but those were things that I did. Lots and lots of different experiments, as you know, and but through all of it, I found a love for finishing. I found a love for woodwork and restoration. And we went through a lot of hard times in you know the late '90s and early 2000s. We went through a lot of issues, and our furniture industry changed from import, basically. They had stuff coming overseas that looked like antique, smelled like antique, but wasn't antique.
right,
People weren't going to pay it. So I was
sure.
forced to learn a different trade. And first kitchen I ever refinished, I was probably 18 or 19 years old. And I was just fortunate, Eric. Honestly, I had a very good friend, general contractor friend, who had a painter who did all his finishing. And he had always teased me, "Oh, one day I'm going to have you do one of my kitchens." But it never came. But one day the painter didn't show up because of whatever issues that guy had. And he called on me. He called on me and he says, "Dennis," he's like, "I need to get this kitchen finished. It's oak cabinets, of course, medium walnut stain," and gave me some samples of the colors that they wanted. And I said, "Okay." I said, "It's going to take me a couple of weeks because, I have a full-time job." And from there, they seen the finish that I did, and it was deep and thick and solid because I was used to doing furniture and antiques and restoration. So you had an eye for that. And from there, the rest is history. I kind of, from that age on, I kind of started moving towards doing kitchen restoration, kitchen refinishing, kitchen. I did for a long time. I did a lot of kitchen repairs and touch ups. There was a company which is a world, it's all over the world, O'Neill Moving Company, and they used to contract us to do, burn-ins and touch-up repairs, hot stick, all those repairs. It saved them thousands of dollars. So, that's, and a lot of it I didn't know. A lot of it I faked it till I made it. I used a lot of Mohawk aerosol cans and things because I didn't know about universal tints. I didn't know about universal colorants. So it was one of those things where you had to figure it out on the fly, and move forward. I don't know, close to 30 years later, you know, um, it's become something different. It's become,
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right, so let's talk about. Let's fast forward to where we're at. I guess what we met about probably 8, 9 months ago, probably.
I think it was after that, after the eight. I didn't meet up with you at the show, but after that is when we kind of really started talking a lot, and that's when
Yeah,
you kind of twisting my arm. Come on, man, you got to. I sent you some pictures of some of my work, and it seemed like you like, you appreciated the workmanship.
absolutely. Yeah, beautiful stuff. Yeah, I was like, man, this guy's legit. And
Yeah,
then, and then I think right after I went and visited Marco over at MK Sales, you said, all right, dude, I'm gonna do this water based stuff.
that's it. That's where it all started. That was it right there. Um, I seen you do it. I seen the results. I seen the testing, and I said I got to try it for myself.
Absolutely.
And that's where it went. I said I need to get my hands on some because, as you know, 5, 6, 7 years before, we all struggled with water base.
Yeah.
You know, my first experience with water base was probably maybe 10 months before I met you. There's a cabinet builder that I do quite a bit of work for, and he still uses to this day Enduro. And he was insistent that I used his finishing system. I was just refinishing the doors. It was probably somewhere in the vicinity of 90 pieces, but he was so far behind he needed some help. And so he says, meet with my finisher and go through the finishing schedule. And and run the job, you know? And I said, okay. And I'm thinking finish is finish, you know? But my eyes were open really quickly that finish is not finish, you know?
Yeah, water base is a different animal, isn't it?
Water based is a different animal. It's definitely a different animal. And so I think when the other finisher gave me the finishing schedule, I think he left out a couple steps, maybe, you know, to see if I could pull it off or not. But I was up to the challenge, you know. I was up to the challenge. I used their whole system, their water based primer, you know, the whole nine. And I think at that he's using a different primer now, but I want to say he was using ML Campbell's Universal at the
Okay.
time. It's
Yeah.
a good it's a good
Yeah.
primer.
Yeah.
But two coats is not enough. Not
No.
for not for enduro. Not
Yeah.
on wood, not on raw wood.
Yeah.
So, you know, I figured out the finishing system on that, and I figured it needed a little more primer, and I figured it needed a little more top coat, and a little bit finer sanding than what we're used to doing to make it tight. But at the end of the day, the job came out really, really nice. And when I delivered it, even the shop manager, he was pretty impressed. He was like, "Whoa, you know, for your first time running this stuff, damn." He's like, "It took our finisher 6 months to figure it out."
Yeah.
You know, so but I swear to God, I'd never use that enduro material again. It's just the viscosity is so thin. There was some pedestal pieces that he had given me to finish, and there's no vertical. It was really no vertical hang, not for the way I finish.
Yeah.
I think you could get it to vertically hang, no problem, using maybe a turbine or using the
Yeah.
systems, but I don't use those systems. I run pretty much predominantly airless.
Yeah.
So
Well, and the thing about it is really those coatings are made for an HVLP
yeah,
cup gun turbine. They're super thin. It goes back to that. If you guys haven't seen the video that where I talked to Mike Chris O'Malley, the chemist from Envirolac, we kind of talked about that and discussed it. That there are chemists and formulators out there that say, well, we just need to make this material thin so that it works like a lacquer. And I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of that. Everybody knows that I'm not a fan of general finishes, but you can get a good finish off of it. But you have to put it on 2 to 3 wet mills, and man, you got to do like 5, 6 coats of that stuff before you get the same build that you're going to get with the products that we're using
oh
to
yeah,
get the same look. You know what I mean? It's real thin. It takes a lot to build. Very low solid product.
it looks on the off the gun, it looks amazing. When I
Yep.
sprayed the stuff, I was like money. I was like money. Came back the next day, and I could see the wood. I could see
What
all
happened?
see all the and I told my lead, his name's Edgar, and I told Edgar, I said, hey, you know what, this ain't gonna fly. He goes, I don't understand it. It looked so good when we sprayed it. So I said, look, let's just go back and let's resand these doors out. Let's apply 2 more coats of primer. And on the last coat of primer, let's tighten up our sandpaper to 400 grit instead of 320.
Right.
And that was the trick. And then it was 3 coats of top coat.
Yeah.
And then they look money after that.
Yeah. So you're really talking about 6 coats.
We're
So
talking
3 coats of
6 to 7 coats to make it realistic. Yeah.
yeah, man. I ain't got no time for that, dude.
That's hard to make money that way. I mean, it was hard to
Yeah.
make money that way, because uh, I run solvent for a lot of years, and a set of doors like that, me and my crew, 90 doors, we could probably knock out 90 doors in a day and a half, 2 days, from start to finish using a pre-cat, or even probably using a conversion, we could probably get close to it also. And that water base, there's no way.
Yeah.
But it's fine because we have so many projects. It's like work on them and then put them away. Work on them and then put them away. And let them do their business. Let them dry. So, but here we are. I don't know. I'll say close to a year later, and I got the challenge of running Renner 851, and the first job that I didn't sample it at all. I never sampled it the first time I bought it. I had a red cabinet. It was about I want to say it's probably about an 8 foot or 9 foot vanity.
I
And
remember that one. I remember the conversations we had on that one.
I battled with it man, I battled with that one in the beginning, and I bought 1 gallon of the 851. I bought 1 gallon of the 851, and I barely made it with the skin of my teeth on the mistakes that I made on that thing, because I tried first to spray it with an HVLP 1.8 because everybody said it's thick material. So I said, okay. And I didn't want to thin it. I didn't want to thin it. That didn't work. Didn't even come out of the gun. Wouldn't even come out of the gun. And I said, go get the Binks 2-quart pot. Let's try that. And I have a 1.5 and I have a 1.8 on that. And I said, let's try it on the 1.8. Now on the 1.8, it's sprayed. It's sprayed fine, but I had to put more pressure on it with the air, and I had 2 things happen. First thing was I had minor fisheye. Second thing was micro bubbles like crazy. And so I just said, look, let's just put the first coat on, let's let it do its thing, let it dry, and then we're going to have to sand it out. So we let it dry. I didn't catalyze the first coat. Talking with Marco, he said, don't catalyze the first coat. Let it dry and then catalyze the final coat. So I said, okay. Sprayed that and came in the next morning, and it looked okay. But the mistake I made, and you've helped me with that, was I used black primer. I used
not a good idea.
Yeah, not a good idea. And the reason is because the material, and it was fine in the center panel, but on the corners, on the corners, all the way around the door, I could see the halo of black pop into it, So I was like, okay, that's interesting, And when I went to spray the second coat, I had more fisheye. And then I talked to, I believe at that time it was Brian.
Yeah.
It was
Brian
Brian.
Baracio, yep.
Yeah, I called Brian and I was talking with Brian, and he goes, oh, your lines are dirty. Oh, your gun's dirty. Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, man, you know how long I've been finishing? I know how to clean a gun,
Right.
There's not something else is going on. So, I mean, this is after about maybe 6 or 8 hours of fighting with it, So, last thing I do what I know. And I told Eddie to bring out our little X5. We have a little X5 because we do a lot of insurance repair work. And at that time, we were running Pro Industrial Urethane on the resprays of jobs that had maybe an enamel or had like a latex or alkyd or something like that. We would just go through and we would spray that Pro Industrial. I had a lot of success with that material. And I remember that coating being pretty viscous. It was pretty thick.
Yeah.
I told Eddie, let's try it. So the first run I ran was with the 310, and it looked great. And when I first sprayed it, I said, this is it. I told Eddie, look at the way this material lays down with this 310. But the 310 spraying vertical surfaces is a little tough.
Yeah.
So it was a European cabinet. So there was only a one finish panel on one side, and the rest of it, as you know, is all 3/4 inch. It's just framing. So I sprayed the one finish panel with the 310, and I got like, I wouldn't say it was like crying, but it was like that heavy kind of saggy look,
Yeah.
And I don't know what that's called, but
I think they call it sheathing.
Yeah.
It's like basically almost like where the pigments beneath the clear start falling down, and it looked kind of cottage cheesy and
a little wavy.
Yep. Yep. Uh-huh.
So I said, that's fine, let it dry. And then I told him to flat block sand it out with that paint. So he did. And then I changed over to a 308 tip because we run the Pro Industrial with the 308. And as soon as I sprayed the vertical on that, it was like money. And that's when I called you, and I was like, dude, I found the Holy Grail.
Absolutely, man.
I found the Holy Grail. And that's how it started. That's how it went. And I'm starting to fall in love with the water-based finish. I'm a solvent guy, man. I'm a solvent head. Acetone, wash your hands with the acetone. I mean, we're solvent heads, really. We run a lot of pre-cat, we run a lot of conversion varnish, and now we're running a lot of render. Malaysia, I would love to try it, but none of the reps will talk to me. I can't get anybody out here to work with me through Malaysia. So Marco's been really good to me. So I'm going to use his. CIC has reached out to me. Those guys have been awesome. Greg and the rep, I forget his name, the young man over there at Annex. I mean, great people over there.
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
they've given me a lot of materials and supplies to try, and but I like Renner. I've been running Renner. I feel very confident in it, and I think if any of the other systems, I think it would be the same because, from what you said, I mean, there's 3 or 4 big boys, 5 big boys, 6 big boys, whatever you want to call them, and if you can spray one, you can spray pretty much most of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you know kind of what you're looking at, some of them have a little bit different and you can kind of switch up the tips a little bit. But between a 308 and a 312, you can pretty much get the job done. If you want to shoot bigger panels, you can go to a 4 in any of those. But pretty much the 310 and the 308 are the ticket. So I kind of want to go back for a second. So what are your thoughts on the water base versus the solvent base? Because there's a lot of guys out there that still think that solvent is 100 times better than water, and you can't achieve the same type of finish. What's your opinion on that now?
My opinion is, I think people will be hard pressed. I think people will be seriously hard pressed to see the difference of one of my water-based finishes up to a solvent finish, looking at it. And somebody who maybe has a little bit of experience, even if they touched it, there's no way they could tell the difference. You, yourself, Matt, I think it's Russell. There's another guy.
Yeah, Russell.
That are running a lot of, they've done both. They might be able to feel the difference. And the only reason is because honestly, I feel like water has a butterier finish that feel than when it's done right, than solvent does. The only one that I think it would be hard pressed to be smoother than or feel softer than is conversion varnish. Conversion varnish is kind of its own little animal. But water base today, the water base that I'm seeing, I mean, it will stand up next to any job, any solvent on the market. That's kind of how I feel. And eventually we're going to move. Now here in California, we can run solvent all day long, and I'll still run solvent because the systems that we run, and it kind of freaks people out a little bit, because they're like, oh, well, if you have one system that works, run the one system. The problem is that I finish for probably 5 different cabinet shops, probably 6 or 7 big builders, and then we do a ton of insurance repair, and so it's like a lot of them have their own ideas of what they want to do.
Yeah, so absolutely.
I give them my suggestions. I tell them, listen, this is a better system. This is less stink in the house by half because we're running a hybrid system, as you know. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
And so, giving them the benefits of it, but there's a cost difference. There's a cost difference. If they want to run pre-CAD compared to 2K, there's a cost difference. But I love water base right now. We're running water base a lot. And if you would have told me I was going to run water base as much as I'm running 2 years ago, I would tell you to stick it in your ear. Because honestly, like my buddy Brian, I'm a solvent head.
Yeah. Lacquer head,
baby. Lacquer.
That's what my buddy Carlos he calls it. He goes, oh man, all these lacquer heads, man. And he's kind of like you. He's run a lot of solvent, but man, he really likes the water base, man, especially because you can go into someone's house and you can do this stuff and not blow them out. And I don't know, man, it's just really nice to run. It's like you said, it has a it has a waxier feel to it. Like it's like slicker on the hand than some of the solvent stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Especially when it's cross-linked or when it's catalyzed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, I think the 851 right out of the can, I think the 851 right out of the can is probably, maybe I'm blowing it out, but I'm going to say 50% better than a pre-cat out of the can. That's my opinion
Wow. Okay.
from the
Okay.
testing I've done.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk about that for a second, because you told me a story where you had the 851. I think you ran the 643 and the 851, and you left it outside. And I don't know for how many days or whatever. So tell us that story, because it's pretty impressive.
Well, so here's the thing. So I did a job probably this. I think I told you this story a couple months back, but just I had done a job in conversion varnish, and the job I did in conversion varnish was probably a month or two prior to the catalyzed system that I ran. Well, I mean, and both of them were inside the spray booth, right? I sent one of my guys, or it might have been my son, somebody to clean up the booth, and get it all cleaned up because we had some conversion varnish to run. And the two samples got left outside. It rained for 11 days, 10 or 11 days almost straight, on and off. Okay. So I'm working, doing this or that, and we finally get back to work from the rain stopping, and it had been dry for probably 2 or 3 days. And I told the guys, I go, you left my samples outside. Those are samples I wanted to show to customers. They were nicely sprayed out sample doors, 24 by 24 doors. And so I go and I look at them, and the renter's door is on top. And I'm like, oh man, this thing looks perfect. I mean, it had some water spots on it, like dry water spots, And so I pull it, and then I pull the render door. The conversion varnish door that was underneath it. That was, mind you, underneath it. Now, look, the water was pooled. These are raised panel doors, so the water was pooled in the grooves of the raised panel on both of them. The conversion varnish was wrecked. The door was blown apart. The seams were blown apart. The door was completely wrecked. Now, the 851 catalyzed, I believe that door had been previously sprayed in just regular nitro lacquer. So I sanded the hell out of the door, got it all the way down to almost bare nothing, and then I ran the 643 primer catalyzed over it because I wanted to run that system, and then I ran the 851 over the top of it. The door was flawless. Besides the hard water spots.
Yeah.
Besides the hard water spot, that was 10 days in the rain, man. I showed Eddie, and Eddie was blown away because conversion varnish is some tough stuff.
It is.
I do a conversion varnish finish, and usually it's 5 to 7 years before I have an issue of a door crack or a seam crack, something like that. So for that to be in the water for that much time, I told Eddie, I said, if that's not a true test, I don't know what it is. And I called you right after that, and I told you.
Yeah.
And you're just like, damn, that's impressive. So I mean, there's the biggest test that you can have. I remember you telling me, I don't know if it was you or somebody, had a sample in the back of their truck with snow and rain and everything, and basically took the door, wiped it off, and it looked like pretty much close to other than the scratches and stuff, it looked pretty much like the day that it was finished.
Yeah, that was Denny Johns, and the system that he ran was a 2K water base isolator, 2K primer, and that was all Ilva products, and a 2K top coat. Now, granted, this was MDF too, no swelling.
Wow.
No swelling, except for the edge that was exposed, and it still wasn't that bad. And he drove around for like 3 or 4 months with that in the back of his truck. That's a water-based system, guys. Water-based system.
Water-based stuff is impressive.
Yeah, especially the catalyzed stuff.
The catalyzed stuff is off the chain, Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about before we talk about hybrid systems, let's talk about if you're going to run straight water base, what in your opinion is the best way to go about it, and what are some of the pitfalls that people have and that have problems with when they're coming from a solvent mindset? Because you can't treat them the same. It's a different animal. The prep's different, all that. So why don't you talk a little bit about that from your experience?
Coming from the solvent world, say even if you're running lacquer undercoat, if you're just guys who are just running regular typical lacquer undercoat, guys that are not even using vinyl sealer, which I know a lot of guys here in California, they don't even know what vinyl sealer is.
That's crazy, man.
I've tried to inform them. They go on deaf ears. They're used to what they're used to.
Sure.
Okay, so coming from that, I mean, pretty much 2 coats of primer, 2 wet coats of primer, you could probably get away with. Sand the door back and shoot it with a top coat. 2 top coats and you're done. Going over to running a water-based system, you want to talk on fresh new wood or you want to talk on a refinish?
Yeah, let's talk about well, let's break it into both. So let's just talk about both. So talk about system for new wood and then one for and then I'll chime in a little bit on what, my opinion too.
Okay. So for me, for new wood, if you catalyze the primer, it's a different animal. So what we're doing for new wood is typically I run 2 coats. I'm saying 2 coats, but it's 2 wet coats. So we basically box the door, and I with a 310 tip, and let it dry, sand it well with 320, and then this is what I would call the second coat of 310 tip that's catalyzed. Now, by the time you get that second coat of catalyzed material on there, that door is pretty much, I mean, it's about as coated as it's going to be. The wet mills that we're spraying on there, I mean, you tell me if I'm lying. I got to say it's probably close to 6 to 8 wet mills per coat. Close to. But again, we sand it back a lot. So that first coat, it gets sanded back quite a bit. So I think once it shrinks down, that's the one thing about water-based that guys need to realize, that that material does shrink down. Probably, would you say 50%?
Pretty much, just about, yeah.
So it shrinks down. So even if you put 6 or 8 wet mills, it probably shrinks down to between 3 and 4, when it's dry. So, and then we sand it down, and we sand it heavy. I like to use Orbit sander on the flat surfaces. We use 320 grit.
Yep.
And get it real flat. And then we've been using an Astro 3x4 in the shop, and then on the job site we run the surf prep and do all the detail and everything. Get it nice and tight, and then apply our second box coat of 643, and that's catalyzed. And when you're done sanding that door is pretty much flawless. The door is pretty much flawless. Every now and then you might find a little seam or a little pin nail or something that you didn't catch. If it's very tiny, then you could probably just use any of your spackling glazes. White. I would use white or a light gray spackling glaze and glaze your hole, sand it out, and then you should be good. And then from there we run 1 coat of non-catalyzed 851 and let it dry, sand it back. And this is not a sandback. It's mostly just a scuff.
Yeah.
And by the way, you could probably get away with the 1 coat. I mean, it looks really nice with 1 coat.
Yeah.
But I like running 2. I like running 2. I think it looks a little bit tighter. I think it wraps the door just a little bit better. But that second coat, it depends on the job. Either catalyzing it or we're cross-linking. And I mean, when it's done, it's done. I mean, they look flawless. The one thing I gotta say, guys, to emphasize, and I have to emphasize this a lot, and I see a lot of jobs posted on Facebook and here and Instagram and all these different sites. I don't think you guys are doing enough preparation. I think the prep's got to be tighter. The door, pretty much, in my opinion, has to be basically look finished in primer. So once you get it to that finished look, then you're ready to apply top coat. And the reason is because the water base isn't going to do you favors like the solvent does. The solvent will fill, the solvent will cover some imperfections. The water base is not going to do that. It's not. But when it's done properly and all your preparation is done properly, I mean, I
want to kind of key in on what you're talking about with with the prep and the water base. And then that's going to get us into the hybrid systems, which kind of gives you is like the cheat code for the water base. So I posted a picture the other day of the Renner 851, my second coat, and it looked like a freaking 10 sheen finished door. And because I understand what you got to do to get that coat. So basically that last one, and something you got to be careful of when you do your second coat is you got to be careful not to use too low of a grit or it'll basically come through your top coat. So if you use like a 320 at that point and you're running the 851, you're going to see all those little scratches in it and you're going to be like, what am I going to do? So you got to make sure that you go up, but you've got to do what he's saying. You've got to, I mean, it should look like it's in a swimming pool, like almost to the point where you can mud crack it. And if it does mud crack a little bit, it's fine because it's going to get sanded out flat. I mean, sometimes on the edges, I'll get a little mud crack, but I don't really care. I know that second coat I'm going to lay it on. It's going to be super smooth. I'm not going to have any of those issues, but you got to get it built up on the surface, especially when you're dealing with MDF. And I got to be honest with you, that 643, it looks like a freaking vinyl sealer when you're done. I mean, it's bad to the bone.
That's probably, I mean, by far, and I've tested ML Campbell. I've tested, there was another water base that I tested. There's 2 or 3 different ones, but from the 3 water-based primers that I've tested, man, that 643 is hard to beat.
Yeah. The
stuff sticks to anything. You know, it's just an awesome material. I did an oil-based finish job. That this kitchen hadn't been touched in probably 20 years. It was done in oil base. The lady had 4 kids, and they beat the hell out of these cabinets. I mean, they were hammered. I have videos of that one on my Instagram, and I show the adhesion of that 643, scratching it with a putty knife, and I couldn't even dent the material. That's how strong that stuff was. We did have one little failure on 2 of the doors in the backs and the cracks, but that was our own fault. That was because we didn't, we missed some sanding. The surfaces need to be sanded well. That's for sure, and to start before that, on the refinished stuff, we like to sand pretty heavy. We sand with 150 grit. So I like to put some teeth on whatever we're sanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.